Today, we're going to talk about the power of no for your startup. And please chime in and ask questions. And I do want to leave time for questions at the end and keep this conversational because we're going to talk about some culture stuff today that's going to help you reach your goals. No is a word that we often feel icky about saying. We think people won't like us if we're the no guy or gal, right? How can we innovate if we say no to things? We're a startup. Don't we need to have an open mindset, a yes mindset? But I'm here to tell you today that no is not just for toddlers who don't want to eat their peas. No is for innovators like us who want to achieve big things. So today I invite you to take a breath and think about the power of no so that you can say yes to the right things. I'd like you for a moment to think about a time when you said no to something and it produced a positive result. Capture that moment right now. If you have a pen or a paper, if you're an online note taker like me, type it out. What was it that you said no to that produced a positive result that actually got you further to reaching your goal? And how did that feel? Now I want you to think about a time that you didn't say no, but you probably should have. So today we're going to talk about some of the things that happen in startup life. We're all in it. I started a startup. My company, Barlele, we are our branding and marketing team, and we're a startup right now. And I've worked at many startups and experienced a lot of things in the startup world and community, both as a founder and as an individual contributor. And so I want to share some of the things that I've learned that we maybe should say no to more so that we can say yes to the right things. So let's talk about, and I am, sorry, I went ahead and did this. So let's talk about the fact that we often live in a state of productivity dysfunction. We often feel busy and we think we're being productive, but we're not actually being productive. We're just simply busy and we're doing a lot of things and we're maybe pulling 80-hour weeks and we're maybe sleeping at cots in the office. Maybe pre-COVID, I've seen that happen before in the startup world. And when we're living in that state of what I call pretend productivity, it wears on our physical, mental, and emotional health. And when your people at your startup are constantly worn down physically, mentally, and emotionally, they don't actually produce great results for the company. It does affect all of our ability to actually innovate and actually show up as our best selves and actually reach the company's goals. Let's talk about some of the things that we need to consider when taking a leap of faith into a startup. I started my career in larger corporate spaces. I worked for larger companies. And then in around 2015, that's when I went full on early stage startup mode. And when I did that, I had to think about, and I kind of thought some of the things that I would get from that experience would be balance, more energy, because I was excited about doing something that I was passionate about that was early stage, and ambition and passion. These are all things that many of us who are drawn to the startup world or who have founded a company maybe are either looking for or want to achieve and want to tap into more in our startup life. Oftentimes, and those are great things, but oftentimes, let's talk about what really happens. And today we're going to kind of drink some truth serum for a little bit. I've got a cup of coffee. If you've got something, I'm going to invite you to take a sip of truth serum with me. Because what happens often is we have big goals and big hopes and big dreams, and we're ambitious people. And we try to juggle all the things, but there's only so much time in the day, right? We're also often trying to keep up with the Joneses or the startup next door. Well, this is what they're doing. We got to, compete with them. And there's a lot of keeping up with the Joneses that happens that we think is driving our people, right? That we think will make us get better and innovate faster. We're chasing these words: revenue, valuation, quota, KPIs, over and over and over and over and over. These words come into our heads. We hear the board say them, we hear investors say them, we hear the CEO say them, right? Like these are the numbers and the goals that we have set that we have to achieve. Now, what I have found in life and in work is that these things don't actually motivate humans. If your only focus is on these things, revenue, valuation, quota, KPI, and driving and driving and driving and driving towards that, your people aren't really inspired. And that's when the burnout starts. 83% of US workers suffer from work-related stress. That is a big, big number, y'all. 63% of US workers are ready to quit their job due to stress. And I have been there more than once, where I was completely burned out at the startup that I was at, because the focus was not really on innovation. The focus was haphazard. The focus was on reaching all these big, hairy, audacious, scary numbers all the time, and not on actual things that would get us to the end zone. And so we ran around and around and around. And you see this happening more and more. Everyone's been talking about the great resignation. We've seen people in this gig economy now that we live in realize, oh, I can kind of do my own thing. I don't need this company to feel fulfillment in life. And so I think the reason why I want to share this truth serum today is because if we can do a better job at our startup of supporting our people with the right process and the right priorities, and focus on the right products to build and sell, and embrace a culture of more positivity, I think we can actually get to our goals. I think we can actually avoid a lot of the burnout. And a lot of what happens where people are chasing the wrong things, and they're like a dog. I have a new puppy, and she does this. She actually does this. She gets a toy, she puts it in her mouth, and she spins around and around in a circle, just like this dog. And we chase our tails around revenue, KPI, quotas, valuation. We chase our tails around those things, and we think that that might motivate our people to get us to the goal that our board expects or our investor expects. So let's really speak the truth here and talk specifically about what some of these productivity killers are in the startup world. This might shock you at first. People, priority, and process. Okay, let's get into this. It's not people as the productivity killer. It's people spending their time on the wrong stuff. People acting like the dog, chasing their tail, going around and around and around and around. And what is some of that wrong stuff? Well, I've seen it a lot in the startup world. It's a lot of gossip. It's a lot of not getting along. And I'm just going to say it, acting like children. A lot of finger pointing. That's bad culture. It's a lot of people who just show up to say how many startups they've been at. So you've got those startup badge collectors. And when you're hiring and interviewing and building your team, you got to kind of look out for that. It's a lot of ego. in the wrong way and prioritizing being right often over getting things done. I'm sure many of you in the startup world have felt these things before. These are relationship challenges that we face in work culture. And I see them often more so in startup world, right? Because we are hustling and because there is a lot of pressure and there is a lot of stress. And so sometimes it makes us act out and do these things, right? Because we are stressed about reaching the goals that maybe our investor has set for us. So we're under a lot of stress and then we default into this bad behavior. So we have to just recognize that this happens in order to fix the behavior. Now, when we talk about priority as a productivity killer, this is really about the wrong priorities or the wrong order of priorities. So maybe we're just focusing on the wrong thing at the wrong time, or maybe we have shiny object syndrome and we're just focusing on the wrong things. Or I think Jacqueline said it, and someone said it in the talk before mine, trying to take on too much. And some of these things are just making lists for list's sake. So, again, going back to that kind of productivity dysfunction, well, we're checking a lot of boxes off the task list and we're doing a lot of things and we're going to do this and we're going to build that and we're going to do that and we're going to go to this conference. And you have all these things. And again, you think because you have so much stuff that it makes you look good, it props you up to the board or whoever you're presenting to, right? Like we're going to do this and that and this and that. And oftentimes it actually makes us spin around like the dog because it's too much. There's also oftentimes a lot of, I know I see people arguing on LinkedIn about this. Well, that meeting could have been an email. And here's what I'll say about that. Oftentimes we prioritize meetings for simple things that could be emails. And sometimes we send things in emails that actually should be a conversation. So this is a productivity killer to listen to and to be attuned to. When is the time to not send an email, to not just shoot a message on Slack, but to pick up the phone and talk to the person on the other end of what you're trying to get done? And when is the time that you need something formally in writing and it's quick and it's easy and you can put that in an email and we don't have to pull everyone onto another Zoom call? So those are some of the things to think through in terms of how are you prioritizing your time and the actual priorities of projects and products that you are working on. The last thing is process, and this is actually the lack thereof. Or this is pretending to have process, and that's a fun one. It's because I don't know about you guys, but I've seen that one a lot, right? Like, oh, we've got process. Well, really? Or sometimes it's even having the wrong process just for the sake of having process. And I've heard this before, startups before, where there was a process, it clearly wasn't working. And I got pushback, when I voiced my concerns with the process. I got pushback, well, we've just kind of always done this process. And it is a process. Yeah. But if it's not, maybe it's just process for the sake of process. So we can get caught up and hung up on process as a productivity killer if we're doing it wrong, or if there's just a total full on lack of process. So when you think about these things, people setting priorities and creating processes, and then you think about those other things that we're often chasing and really, really focused on. We're so focused on the revenue number, the sales number, the KPIs that we've set that we have to achieve, that these other things, the people and the culture, the priorities and the process, they get all out of whack. They don't get the attention or the level of focus that they really need. The last thing I'll say about process is don't, throw tomatoes at me, because I know this is a startup community. I think Slack is full of nonsense. Okay. There, I said it. It can be a great tool. I've also seen it make a lot of organizations go off the rails. There's gossip that happens on back channels on Slack. When you're thinking about process and trying to follow actually what's going on, there's a lot of conversation and things that happen in these long threads on Slack often because people are conversational in it, but then you lose the train of thought and you lose the thread. So I'm not here to say don't use Slack, because it can be a great collaboration tool. And it can also be sometimes a good team building tool, right? For people, especially in this virtual world, to get to know each other, to have that water cooler talk. But Slack should not be the end all be all communication channel. And that's my point here with Slack today, is there is a time and a place to pick up the phone and have a call, to send an email. Use Slack for conversational things and for positive culture building, but don't use Slack as your documentation tool or the end all be all of everything. Because there's been so many times where there's been a huge long Slack, thread. Well, I send it to you in Slack. I get 500 Slack messages a day. Some of us do. How could I possibly see all of it and keep up with it? Right? And the last thing I'll say is Zoom overload. And this goes back to the meetings that could be emails. We should not and we cannot expect our people to be on 8 to 9 to 10 hours of back-to-back meetings all day long. It is not healthy. It is not actually allowing people to have the time and the space and the brain energy that they need to produce the great product that you're building, to focus on building the right relationships for your company, or to put the right processes in place if all we're doing is jumping on a Zoom call all day long. All right. So those are some of the issues. That's some of the truth serum. We have to identify the issues in order to fix them. So what do we do about it? And by the way, feel free to just chime in and interrupt me and say something if I've missed anything on the live chat, because I get into a mode of talking and I am happy to be interrupted if I need to stop and pause for a minute. What do we do about it? First thing you can do is take a deep breath. It's all going to be okay. There are solutions. There are solutions to these culture issues and these culture problems that we have often in the startup world. Again, I go back to the power of no. If we start to say no to the things that are wrong for us, all of those things that we outlined, if we start saying no to all of these bad habits, we can start freeing up the time to say yes to the right things. How do we do that? And what are the right things? And here's what I'll say. Revenue, valuation, quotas, KPIs. These things fall into place when you focus on the right things that actually motivate and support your team to succeed. I'll say it again. Revenue, the sales numbers, the big, hairy numbers, the KPIs, those are often in the forefront. I fundamentally believe and have seen this work when you focus on the right things. And I'm going to get into those. The revenue comes, it falls into place. getting all of the other right pieces of the machine working together in tandem and well oiled makes the sales possible. It makes the great product get built. It makes all of these other things come in line. But we have to place our emphasis on these other things to get the machine working better, or else we are always going to be missing that revenue number. And again, that's just a little bit of truth serum. I've seen it happen time and time again. When that's the only focus, the other stuff in the machine, the other parts don't work. And then the revenue never hits, right? But if you get the other machine parts well oiled and working together, that big important number, the sales, the money, the stuff that we do have to hit, it does come. But that's hard and that's scary, right? Because right now, that's not really the way the world works. The world is driven by what's the number. So we have to sort of start to, as startup founders, as startup leaders, start to think a little bit differently about that and start to evolve the culture. So you're going to see some similar words here. What are productivity creators in the startup world? I talked about how we get these wrong. Now let's talk about how we get these right. If these are the four pillars, I believe, that we need to say yes to in the right way in order for the revenue and the big goals to come in and to work for us, right? In order to hit those things, we have to have the right fit people. We as startup leaders need to not allow the bad egos and the gossip and those things to happen. And we have to lead by example. And a lot of it starts with just building the right team and making sure you have people that fit together well. Once we have the right people in place and kind of working alongside of this, it's really important early on to develop process that supports your people. Not process for the sake of having process, but process that works. Then we need to focus on the right priorities, and you can use your processes to prioritize appropriately. This gets into the weeds of things like project management tools, how you run your stand up meetings, how you do your sprints, things like that, right? But it really is fundamental at the beginning to get these things right. And lastly, product. Are we building products that are a good fit for the people, process, and priorities you have in place? And that might sound a little bit backwards to you because a lot of times we start our company with the product vision. This is the thing, the great big thing I'm going to build, and I'm going to sell it for a lot of money. That's often where we start in our heads. If we have the right people, processes, and priorities in place, we'll build the great product. We'll build the right thing. But you have to make sure that's a right fit too. You have to have the right people in place for the product that you're going to build. And again, then it all comes into place. It all starts to work. Let's also think about how do you get people who you have excelling. I'm a big fan of Clifton Strengths Finders and the work that Don Clifton did, where he said, you know what, people, like we kind of got this wrong in our culture. We often say, if you're bad at math, just get a tutor and do more math. Or if you're bad at this, focus on your weaknesses. He said, hey, why don't we really start to flip the script and understand people's strengths and then help them excel at what they're already naturally gifted at? And if we do that, and we align people to work on things that they're already really gifted at, and then we surround each other with people that are gifted at other things, it'll just work, right? And so when you think of your startup and your team, a lot of this is about having a lot of emotional intelligence and self-awareness about maybe what you're good at as the founder and where you need people to fill in your gaps, or looking at the people on your team or the team you're trying to build and understanding what strengths do I need and how do I find all of those strengths and focus people intentionally on their strengths and not trying to make a, you know, square peg fit into a round hole. Culture really matters. I like this quote from this article recently that I saw in Fast Company. It said the whole intersection of work and life is a major influence over why people are attracted to a new employer and choosing to leave another. Something organizations need to become more mindful about is how work and personal life now blend, and the role employers must play in supporting the whole person and not just the worker. And I know sometimes some of this stuff, we're busy, we're in our work life, we're just trying to build a product and make money. And like this stuff can sometimes feel fluffy, or you might think, you know what, just go do some yoga. But this stuff really matters because we actually do spend a lot of time at work. I spend more time talking to my team than people in my personal life because work takes up a good portion of our day and our week. And it's what we put a lot of effort into, and it is where we often get a lot of fulfillment and a lot of joy. So, focusing on the culture, and again, going back to the people and making sure you have people fitting together well, and you're supporting positive interactions and positive relationships will help you keep your good people. Because what we don't want is we don't want that churn. We don't want unhappy people. Unhappy people leave. And unhappy people who leave mean we take another step back and another setback, and we have to start over again. And if we're trying to deliver great results and innovate quickly at our startup, how can we do it if we have unhappy people who are leaving all the time? So that's why this stuff does affect the bottom line and why it does matter so much. I won't go through all of these and I'll leave my slide deck. I know we're coming to an end, but I think that these are interesting things for us to be mindful of in the startup world. People do have a choice. There is a reason the great resignation is happening. Is they're realizing so much more the choice. And so read through these things when you have some time to sit down and think about this and think about, like, are you supporting people with these things that they need? The modern professional wants these things in their life. Are you an employer? Are you a startup that can help to give these things? Maybe you can give a ping pong table, but that doesn't matter to humans at the end of the day. People want to have a voice, they want to have a choice, they want to show up, they want to feel respected, and they don't want to deal with egos and gossip and nonsense. And that's just the truth of how people work. But you have to think about, who are you and what do you do? What is your role in your startup? It starts with the leaders. Leaders need to lead by example. If you're a leader at your startup, I want you to really sit down and take that moment of pause and that breath today and think about these things. Are you leading by example positively, or are you sniffing out that there are some of these issues happening and you need to nip it in the bud? Everyone needs to communicate. Good communication within your startup will make you reach your goals. Everyone needs to be able to listen, whether you're at the top or you're the person running the errands. Everybody needs to be able to listen to everyone and having an open mindset. If you're the leader, I want you to listen for these productivity killers, signs, and symptoms. Say no when you hear them. Catch them early on before they create a toxic culture at your startup, before you become the startup that everybody's leaving because it's toxic. Say yes to people, process, the right prioritization, and building the right products for all of those other things. Lastly, I'm going to close out and leave you with this. My mantra in life is minimize to maximize. I use this in my personal life. I use this in my work life. It's what my TED Talk was about, if you want to go watch it. Minimize to maximize is about focusing on the right things and dropping the wrong things. It is about the right things. It's about doing the right things, delegating things that shouldn't be on your plate, and dropping the things that are just flat out wrong. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here because I want to leave a couple minutes for questions. And I want to just say that rewarding journeys in the startup world and the startup life, it's 1,000 baby steps to reach your goals. So enjoy the journey, enjoy the rewards of the process and the joy of the process, and taking one step every single day. And don't forget to breathe. Very important one. Breathe, take a pause when you hear these things happening, when you see these culture issues happening or these process issues happening in your world at your startup. Take a breath and take a pause to work on fixing those things. Because if you fix those things, the innovation will happen, the revenue will happen, the right things, the big goals we have set out to achieve will happen. But you have to say yes to fixing those things. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I hope this was helpful and insightful, and I'm available for questions.
Taylor, thank you so much for that. That was there were so many good nuggets that I took from that. So I appreciate you joining us today. I'm looking at the chat to see if there's any questions for you. We have about 7 minutes. So while we wait for some questions to come in, where can people find you online? LinkedIn, Twitter?
Yeah, I'm really LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm terrible at Twitter, and I just flat out admit that. So like, but find me on LinkedIn. I'm really active on LinkedIn and do a lot there, and I'm happy to connect. You can also email me, taylor@barlele.com. My company is called Barlele. It means only soaring, and I'm happy to answer any questions by email as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was good. I hope this was helpful and insightful. And it looks like some people were, resonating with, oh, yeah, I felt that before. We all have, So again, we have to bring it to the surface and, recognize that these things happen in order to overcome them, because they can be overcome.
I agree. And I think one thing that I really resonated with was, especially being a startup, because I came from the corporate world, is like how toxic it could be for like a early stage startup. It could be so detrimental when that is happening. And yeah, I took a lot of great little nuggets that I'll be sharing and tagging you in, whether it's on Twitter or mainly LinkedIn, since you're not on Twitter. But
cool. I am on Twitter. You can find me there, and I just might not see it for a little while. No.
No problem. Well, Jenna has joined us. I don't know if there's any questions that have come in yet, so we'll wait another minute or so, and then otherwise, thank you so much again for joining us today, Taylor.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
So I have a quick question for you, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
So telling on myself, I work at a company where we have a lot of the things that you were talking about. So I'm definitely taking a lot of nuggets back. But something I've noticed as well is because of this massive communication culture, there are certain people that get left out of the communication. And like somehow they're always the last to know. How do we kind of deal with the other side of the problem and ensure that we're being inclusive in the way we communicate?
Like with the people that are just less likely to speak up or insert themselves, maybe.
Or that get missed. So like everybody's communicating in certain channels and they're not there.
That, in my opinion, it probably depends a little bit on the size and organizational structure of your company. But I think that that's something for leaders to be mindful of, is making sure that they're creating space for everyone to feel involved and like they've got opportunities to come to the table and speak their mind, bring their ideas, be involved in the conversation. It certainly does happen a lot where people get left out. And I think that it really is the manager and the leader's job to say, I need to create some space at some time, even if it's once a quarter, where we do everybody gets to bring their ideas session, right? Or we do some sort of a virtual whiteboarding thing where everyone gets to start to put in their ideas and then we're going to talk about it. I think that that's one of the ways that, again, you can do that. Helping people know that they can feel confident in coming and to the table and voicing their concerns. Again, that's kind of a culture thing that oftentimes it does have to start at the top with good leadership. And so that is why I think it's important for leaders to work on themselves as leaders, to drive a better culture and to even identify their own leadership weaknesses to fix those things. Hope that helps. It's tricky stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. When it gets to be like massive communications, there's always people who get left out, and figuring out how to address both sides of the problem is tough.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have enough time for this question, but maybe some food for thought. What is your perspective on like the founder or CEOs having like an open door policy, and for at least for transparency and communication, because I feel like a lot of people are afraid to speak up if something is wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I support it, that's sort of my MO. Like, I'm very much an open book and say, like, come talk to me. I think clearly, like, there are things that, like, there's levels of transparency, and then there are things that sometimes, like, the CEO is just not going to be able to tell everyone in the company, right? Like, that's just life. Like, there are things that, like, only a few select people might need to know as things are happening, right? And so that is just life. But I think it is good to have people feel like they can go and communicate even up to the top. Depending on the size of your company, that can get to a space of where, like, okay, well, if there's 200 plus people at your company, like, the CEO only has so much time. So there's also being realistic with it, but determining a way to make sure that that is bubbled up to the CEO. I've seen this work pretty well in some forums where I was at about a 250 person company that was still like kind of, early-ish and growing. And the CEO held roundtables pretty frequently. And it was very well communicated that, like, you really could kind of say anything in those roundtables. And so while there wasn't a lot of time one-on-one with him, there was an opportunity regularly. And that was one of the best cultures I've ever been at. And it was positive. So I thought that worked well.
Appreciate that. Well, we've come to our time. I'm going to let Jen take over. Taylor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Yeah. All right. Bye.